So here's where I got carried away. Hello, welcome back to my channel, Knits by Mandy. My name is Amanda, and this is the 7th episode of my knitting podcast on my channel. So I follow a pretty normal, regular format for the podcast episodes. We'll start talking about finished objects, whips, acquisitions, future plans, and then at the end I like to talk about whatever media I've been consuming that month, what I've been watching while I've been knitting or listening to. So with that being said, I have a lot in store for this episode, so we'll just jump right into it. Before we get started, I kind of want to follow and practice with what I've seen other podcasters do with sharing their measurements so that you all have better sizing information if you choose to make any of the patterns that I talk about. So I have all my information here. I'll read it to you now, and I think in the future I'll just make a note that this information is included in the description. So for everyone's reference, I am about 5'4", 5'4". I weigh around 140 pounds, give or take, depending on a lot of different things. My bust measurement usually comes in around 37 inches, which is 94 centimeters. My waist measurement is 31 inches, 78 centimeters, and my hip measurement is 39 inches, which is 99 centimeters. And I wear a size 7 shoe. So I will be talking, I think, doing my first sock pattern. Probably you'll hear about it in my next episode, so that might be pertinent information for then. So just to be just so you have all the information of how something may fit me as I'm reviewing it. So that will be now included in the description for my future videos, and I think we can move on. So to start with what I'm wearing briefly, I do have a whole podcast episode on this sweater. This is sweater number 15 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and it is made with We Are Knitters Finita and Touch Me Mohair that I bought kind of before the whole like Zara thing. I don't really shop there anymore, but that's what I used at the time, and I think the colors are cinnamon. So it's actually cold here. It all happened very quickly. On the equinox, it was hot. It was like almost a summery kind of day, and then it rained. And since then, like last week, we had this like beautiful brisk fall weather, but now it's been kind of gray and cloudy. We got the remnants of Hurricane Ian, and I'm hoping they will dissipate soon and we can get a little bit of sun, because I'm feeling a little gloomy. But I thought I would put on my most autumnal sweater that I own. So yeah, there's like a lot of noise going around in my apartment today, but I really did have to film it now in order to get it up before my month gets really busy. So we'll start with my first finished object, all the way over here on this side of the couch. So this is my first finished object, and this is the Stockholm Slipover by PetiteKnit. And this is knit with La Bien-Aimée Merino singles, in the color Rose Quartz, held with drops air in, I think, off-white. So the story of this slipover is that I bought this yarn earlier in April. It was kind of an impulse purchase, and it was, I thought it was a really beautiful yarn, and I still think that. And I actually have some swatches here so you can see what it looks like just by itself. So here's what the swatch looks like I tried to unfurl it because I was really worried I wasn't gonna have enough yarn. That wasn't an issue. But this is what it looks like knit up. It has this really beautiful, it's like ochre, like brownie, like yellow color, some maroon, and then some navy blue on this cream base. So that's what it looks like held by itself. And I didn't really feel inspired by this, to be honest. And I think now that I have the finished object, I actually think I would want something with more color throughout. I don't necessarily think, for me personally, I like speckling on a white or a cream base, just for my wardrobe purposes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then this is what it looked like when I swatched it with the Drops Air. So you can see the difference. It kind of really mutes, I'll get my fingers out of the way. It mutes the jewel tones a little bit. And of course you get that halo that you do when you knit with a mohair. So those are what they look like, in case you're wondering. I believe the Merino singles are the superwash wool. And yeah, that is all the information about the yarn. So I bought 2 hanks of the LBA yarn, which isn't obviously quite enough for a sweater. And I think I was almost too limiting of myself in selecting a pattern. But I basically decided I was going to do a slipover, and it would be a good transitional piece for fall, and that I would hold it with the mohair, 1, to make it a little quicker, and 2, to kind of make the colors softer. And I genuinely think that the finished object is really pretty. I think the yarn is gorgeous. I just don't know how it's going to fit into my wardrobe, and I think that's where all my iffiness is. I'll go ahead and try on the garment, and we'll talk a little bit about the construction. So at first, when I first finished blocking this, I was like, I don't think I like this. But then I tried it on and I took finished objects pictures, and I actually really kind of, I did like how it came out with the, with like jeans and like a full put together look, you know, makeup, jewelry, you kind of get the whole look going, and you're like, okay, I can see it. And I think for me, just, I don't know where the slipover will fit in my wardrobe, but I definitely think I can find a place for it. This is what the finished object looks like on. It's a very simple slipover construction, just knit and stockinette, with 1x1 ribbing around the edges. And to talk a little bit more about the pattern, I think I went for a size small, and the pattern goes up to a 5XL, which I believe is a 60-inch bust. So the pattern, just like many PetiteKnit patterns, very easy to kind of get through. The only part that I think I flagged in my last video was that there is German short row shaping on the shoulders, which I liked, but I think if you are a beginner, you've never done short rows before, she could explain it a little more. There are some videos on her site, but they are, I believe, voice-overed in Danish, but they do have English subtitles. So you just might have to do a little bit more searching to get more information about German short row shaping. I've been really helped out a lot by Roxanne Richardson, her videos. She actually, they helped me with the sewn bind off for this, because I always would mess up a sewn bind off, and also it was kind of another good supplementary short row video as well, that I referenced for both this and another whip. So I think doing this pattern, and then you'll see my next whip is the Ingrid sweater. Doing them in succession was actually pretty helpful, because the short row shaping is very similar in both of those patterns. So it kind of gave me an opportunity to brush up on my German short rows before going to something that's a little more structural and difficult to read, because it's done in moss stitch instead of just stockinette. So yeah, you start the back, German short row shaping for the shoulders, join the front and the back, stockinette all the way down, sewn bind off, armpits, collar, you're done. It's very easy, very simple. And now that I have it on, it's warming up to me. I don't love how the ribbing came out, but I think that's just the nature of the fabric. And I think this was the first time I actually did a sewn bind off since I did this. I would not recommend trying a sewn bind off with like doing a mohair and a wool together for the first time. That was a big mistake on my part, because it gets really frustrating if you mess something up, or as you're just like pulling the yarn through the loops, like the yarn gets really icky. So I would not recommend doing that. But for this, I think it worked out well. Again, I did end up cropping the length, and I ended up with probably like 3/4 still left of the second hank. So I didn't really use up all the yarn like I wanted to. And I thought that I'd maybe make a Sophie scarf to match this. The only thing is that I have also a bunch of Drops Air left over, or the Drops Kid Silk, and I think I over-ordered just to have it on hand, which probably shouldn't have done because the Drops Air is a bit scratchy. So I am glad that I chose a Slipover, which is something, you know, or a sweater vest that you'll wear over another layer. So really the only place I can feel it is when I have my arms down, and that's not as sensitive as maybe like this area, right? I feel like if some, you know what I mean? Like I feel like things feel way more itchy if they're around your neck than this. What's this area called? This isn't your forearm. You know what I mean? They're on your like tricep. It's not too bad. So I think a Sophie scarf actually as a headband I could handle with this held double, but not around my neck. And I also don't think I would wear this and then that scarf around my neck at the same time. I'd look like a flight attendant of like Knit One Purl Two Airways, which idea, floating that, I'm not sure what that would entail. I think I hit all my points. Every time I wear it, I'm kind of like, I like it, but I haven't actually worn it out of my house yet. So maybe I'll wear it, test run it in some Zoom calls. And I do have a few trips coming up that maybe I can bring it on for. So there's kind of my transitional piece, even though it feels like fall was like, we're here immediately, no transition. So we'll see how much we get use out of it, and I'll probably talk about it in my kind of end of the year video, and we'll see how my relationship with the Slipover has changed. So with that, I think I'm gonna put my sweater back on just because I am actually chilly sitting in my apartment with just the sweater vest, because I don't have my heat on yet. Moving on to works in progress. I have one really big one and then a few smaller ones for you all. I usually don't have many whips, but once you see them, I think you'll see why. So the first big one that I have the most to say about is the Ingrid sweater by PetiteKnit. So we have another PetiteKnit pattern. I think this is the only other PetiteKnit pattern in this episode. So it's PetiteKnit forward, but we have other patterns listed if you're interested. So this is what I have so far. This is the yoke of my sweater, and I need to collect my thoughts before I start talking. I've had so much fun knitting this sweater, and I know that everyone says that makes it, but it's true. Here to verify that claim. And I think I talked about this in my fall planning video, but if you didn't watch it, this is definitely a pattern I've seen all over Instagram. I was following the hashtag for a while, but then every time I opened up Instagram, I saw an Ingrid sweater, like legitimately, it was on the top of my feed every time, and I was like, okay, I get it. Like, I get what the sweater looks like. I want to make it. I've decided. And that's something that I'll do if I'm trying to decide if I want to make a pattern, is I will follow the tag on Instagram, and then I'll kind of that like overexposure to the pattern, I think helps me decide if I want to make it or not. More often than not, I think it ends up with me making the pattern, but by the time that I got the yarn for this, I was so excited and ready to just like cast this on. So a little bit about the yarn, and then I'll talk about the pattern. I decided to go to my local yarn store, Looped, here in DC, because I saw originally I was planning that I would knit this in the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. I knew that I didn't want to do the mohair for this pattern just because I had purchased mohair for another pattern and I wanted to just, you know, save some money, and I didn't necessarily think that this pattern needed it. And I did see Brooke from Popsicle Frog Knits. She did a beautiful video highlighting her process making the Ingrid sweater. She didn't use mohair. Hers looked amazing. So I was like, great, that's my green light to not do the mohair. So I had a color in mind, but I wanted to see it in person because I did kind of have an experience with my canvas on number 5. I thought I was ordering like a lighter brown, but it ended up being darker, which was fine. But I thought if I can go see, they had like a majority of the colors of the heavy merino. If I can go see them in person, I can really decide. I'll see if they have the color that I'm thinking about, and I'll go from there. So I was really thinking about doing the oatmeal color, which, as I suspected, was a little bit too dark than what I wanted. So for the PetiteKnit photos that she uses, I would maybe say like a cream, an ivory, a light beige, and I wanted something a little more brown, a little like a skosh darker. So I didn't really see any Knitting for Olive yarn that like was exactly what I wanted. And then at that point I had like a really strong picture of what I wanted. So I looked around the store, and in between a few colors, I ended up deciding on this Cascade yarn. So this is the Cascade 223 Heathers. This is what it looks like in the hank. And then of course I have it caked up here. And it's really like, this looks like a bowl of oatmeal. The Knitting for Olive oatmeal looked a little more brown and a little darker. This looks like Quaker Oats to me, at least. So it's a light beige, but again, it's heathered, so it has like a little tinge of gray in it, but it is warmer. So it's kind of in between this and like maybe something that was closer to like a light gray, and I decided this is what I wanted. So I was joking with someone at the store. She was really nice, and she was like, oh, what are you looking for? And I was like, oh, I'm just deciding between 50 shades of beige for the Ingrid sweater, because that's what it felt like I had in my hand. But you know, when you have something really specific that you want, that's what you want. So anyway, this also ended up being cheaper than the Knitting for Olive. This was 100 grams for $11, and I believe the Knitting for Olive is only 50 grams for about $10 US. So if I chose Knitting for Olive, it'd be around a $100 sweater, and then this is about a $70 sweater. So for the amount of yarn, I feel like that's a pretty good deal, and for how soft this yarn is, I'm really happy with the purchase. The yarn is really nice. It's Peruvian Highland wool, and you get about 220 yards for 100 grams. And the color, I'm trying to find that, is 2442. If there is a name to the color, I will let you know, but that is the number. Yeah, so that's how I decided on the yarn. I'm really happy with how it looks, feels, and I do have a swatch, which is like, I messed up the crosshatch in my swatch, and I also didn't do the eyelet rounds, but I figured if I was kind of close enough to gauge, I want this to be oversized anyway. So what I did, and you can see other people's gauge swatches on Instagram if you look up the hashtag. I did just each section. I forgot about the eyelet rows, and then I just knit it to what the gauge was supposed to be, and then I measured this swatch. I don't know if that was the right way, but that's the way that I did it. Again, I messed up the crosshatch horribly, and then I didn't do the math for like, and then I just stopped, but I figured it out. So moving on to what the sweater actually looks like. Here is the yoke. And the Ingrid sweater is a very structural design. You start with the back yoke by knitting in this moss stitch. You do short row shaping, like I said. and you finish the back yoke. You do each shoulder, join in the round, and it's a drop shoulder design here. So as you can see, I'll pick up stitches for the sleeves. And then each row is split up with these eyelets, which are fun, which I did in my Ingrid top this year as well. So lots of like learning from other patterns that I felt like. So I've like done eyelets. I just did short row shaping, which her her instructions were very similar. And the false cabling, I think is it faux cabling, was the only thing that was like actually very new to me. So, but it's actually pretty easy to figure out. And this was also my first time reading charts. So other than an intarsia chart, it's a little bit different. I guess like the direction in which you read is the same, but the boxes are obviously different than an intarsia chart. Intarsia is just telling you what color, and this is telling you what to do with the stitches. Okay, more notes on the construction of this sweater. Like I said, it's been knitting up so quickly. So today is Wednesday, and I started this last Saturday. So not the past Saturday, but the Saturday before. So I guess it's been about like 10 days, 11 days since I've started this. And I posted this on my Instagram, and I'm like, knitting is never a race. Knitting is not about how fast you can make this, but like, holy shit. I knit this up pretty quickly. So I was just really focused in after being kind of like wishy-washy and like less excited about, I think, some of my most recent projects. They're lovely projects. I just haven't felt this excited for a pattern and a project in a while. So I'm really glad I decided to make this. And I'm excited to see what it'll look like blocked out, because of course the ribbing will stretch. And I'm just really excited to see it finished. The two final notes on this in the construction is for the collar. I'm thinking it might take some trial and error, but I don't love what the pattern calls for, which is, if you look at pictures, it's a round of 2x2 ribbing and then a round of 1x1 ribbing as a mock neck. And it kind of looks like the 2x2 ribbing bunches a little when I'm looking at pictures, and that might not bother some people, but I think it might bother me. So I've seen photos where people either do just a folded 2x2 regular collar, or they do a mock neck and 1x1 rib, and I think I'm more excited to try the latter, because I actually haven't knit myself a turtleneck or a mock neck, but I love that silhouette. Like, I love wearing turtlenecks in the winter. It might lower the versatility of this project by just a little bit, because you can only really wear them when it's really cold, but I think I'll start with the mock neck in 1x1 ribbing, see how I like it, and then if I don't like it, I'll rip it out and do just a folded collar. So the other thing is that people have noted that when you start decreasing on the sleeves, I believe it's during a like cross hatch faux cabling section, and it gets a little hairy. So we'll see how that goes. I saw one person just decided to omit decreasing, but we'll see where that goes. I think by that point I'll just be so excited to have this finished and have it done. Hello, editing Amanda. I just filmed this like an hour ago, but wanted to say one thing I did not mention in my review of the Ingrid sweater, and my lunch is in the microwave. One thing that I didn't mention that I really appreciate is that when I was looking at other like tutorials to do like the left cross and the right cross needed for the faux cabling, she kind of takes the path of least resistance and makes things as simple as they can be. And even for the eyelets too, I feel like when I did eyelets, I did them in kind of a more like intensive way. As you know, there can be many paths to the same result in knitting, but I do appreciate how in her patterns, I think she makes them as simple as possible, even though it maybe result in something that is not super simple looking. So I did want to add that just for your knowledge, and it's something that I noticed when I was looking at different tutorials and from my previous experience in other patterns. So that is the Ingrid sweater. You'll see me wearing it in the next episode. I'm ready to tear through this bad boy and finish it. And I just have one more round of the pattern for the bottom. So, Ingrid sweater. All right, moving on to some other works in progress that are actually very close to being finished. Part of my journeys this month, I'm going to 2 weddings. So the first wedding is for a friend from college. A lot of my friend group, we met like on our freshman floor and we stayed friends, which is kind of an unlikely scenario. But this friend in particular, she moved back to Nebraska, where she's from, after the first year, but we stayed in contact with her, and now she has a partner and a kid. And we haven't seen her in 6 years. We were, planning, I think, to go to Nebraska sooner, but then the pandemic happened, and then all of a sudden, she's married and has a kid. So we're very excited for her. I'm leaving on Friday. Hopefully this episode will be up before then, for Nebraska. Never been to Nebraska before, very excited, and it's gonna be like a really like kind of unorthodox wedding. They're already married, but it's gonna be like an outdoor thing. They've gotten like this huge Airbnb, and like we're gonna have first night we're gonna do roller skating for kind of like the bachelorette, because my friend did a roller derby, and then we are doing like the wedding on Saturday night. So I'm very excited, and yeah. So with that being said, my friend has a kid I've never met before, and I was like, well, I have to knit him a hat. I talked about this in my fall patterns video, but I have knit children hats in the past, and I love it. It's so fun. And I just like love going to hats for, I'll wait for the siren to pass. Okay, I think it's far enough away now. So in the past, I have knit hats for children, and I've loved it. And I've also knit hats for my friends. So it's kind of just been my thing that like knitting people hats is a good go-to gift. And I like it because it's easy, quick, whatever. So this pattern in particular is the Purl Soho classic cuffed hat. And I have it in a baby, kid, and adult size. And I had a bunch of scrap yarn, both from previous baby projects, including this green color and then this multicolored stripe that you see, that was Big Little Yarn Co. And I'll insert the picture here of the hats that I made with this, and the baby cardigan I made with this. But I had all these scraps in these other colors as well, and I thought, this isn't really my color palette, but how cute would it be for my friend's kid? So I needed to cast this on. So I cast this on, I think, before I cast on the Ingrid sweater, and I got this off the needles pretty quickly. Look at this pom-pom. I made a pom-pom. I'm gonna fix it. It's kind of the classic, like, this is just the last thing I have to do. I even blocked this hat, and because I was afraid it was gonna be too small, but I can actually fit it over my head. I look like a hipster dude, but like, how like guys wear their hats like this now, and it's like, aren't your ears cold? Isn't that the whole purpose of a hat? Anyway, let me fix my hair. Yeah, this is the hat. Easy pattern. It's a free pattern. I usually just do free patterns for hats because it's easy enough, and yeah, very simple. This is my first work with actually making something striped. I'm not a huge stripe person, but I love just how the colors play together. It's like, it is very, like, it's childlike, it's retro, it's fall. I actually really love these colors, and they actually go well with my sweater. Anyway, very happy with how this is coming out, and I understand this is basically a finished object, but I do have more whip-like objects as well. So here's where I got carried away. So I was like, I'm making a hat for my friend's kid, but the other thing is that I have also made hats for all my friends except my friend in Nebraska, because I suck. No, I'm kidding. So this is the kind of hat that I've made for all of my friends. This is a sheep and stitch pattern, and it's one of the first things I made on my knitting journey, or when I started getting back into knitting after I knit my first sweater. So it's a very, very basic beginner easy pattern. It is just like how to knit a chunky hat on straight needles. So I'll link it because it was very helpful for me. I will say, I don't think I would go back to knitting a hat on straight needles. I always feel like the seam ends up kind of weird no matter how hard I try to make it neat. But I needed to make the same pattern for consistency's sake because all my friends have a hat that looks like this. I'll insert a picture of 3 of my friends, me and 2 of my friends at brunch, and we all this winter ended up wearing the same hat. So 2 pom-poms, kind of the signature. I think it's so fun. It's whimsical, it's cute, without being like too little kid. And so I decided I needed to make my friend a hat. And then I went ahead and I went to Michael's and I got some Wool-Ease Thick and Quick, and I whipped this up like in a day. It comes together so quickly. This is a perfect project, quick project, and I think one of my favorite use cases for a yarn like Wool-Ease Thick and Quick. So if you're not aware, I have another ball in here. I'll explain it more in just a second. It is just a super bulky yarn. I think it's one of the few super bulky yarns you can find in a craft store that isn't like blanket yarn. And it's 80% acrylic, 20% wool. This is like the thing I made my first sweater in. Really great for accessories. I wouldn't recommend making a sweater in this, but that's just my opinion. So here's what happened. Me was like, okay, well, I'm making her kid a hat. I'm making my friend a hat. I've never met her husband, so I'm like, I have to make him a hat too. And I just went a little crazy, and I still have to make this, but again, it should only take me a day. And then I also have to make the pom-poms, but I decided that I would put myself through that misery all at once, because I actually really hate making pom-poms. I find it very stressful. So these are my hat whips, and I guess this kind of counts as an acquisition as well. So this is the colorway Astroland, and then this is the colorway Cranberry. I think they retail usually for like $8 at Michael's, but Michael's always has a sale, so these were 30% off. We love that. I got really excited about hats there for a second. So yeah, and then I always get nervous that I'm not gonna have enough yarn for the double pom-poms, but I do have a lot of other chunky weight yarns still that I could use and supplement that I think would match. I think this is gonna match like her vibe perfectly. So I kind of wish I made the family matching hats, but I also feel like this is fun too. At least husband and son will match, right? All right. Okay. So, last thing that is funny, you knit this pattern on 10mm needles, and I don't have a circular pair. Like, these are the needles I knit my first sweater on. And so it's extremely awkward, and it really hurts my hands now to make things on these chunky needles, but it's fun because I'm like, oh, I used to do this. So I think if I would continue to make chunky hats, which I do like a chunky accessory, I would pick, I think Sheep and Stitch also has a circular needle pattern. I would pick that instead of the straight pattern, because using these really hurts, honestly. And I think that's where my dislike comes from. That's what I use. Okay, so I feel like I'm on 100 right now. I always get really like excited and like pumped up when I'm doing these podcasts, because I just really like making. I don't know if you can tell, I just feel like I've already said this, but I just had like a huge burst of creative energy and like kind of became reinvigorated. I know I kind of talked briefly about like my headaches that I was dealing with earlier on. So I've been having good days and bad days, but I had some really good days where I cranked out a lot of stuff. Because I think now when I'm feeling better, I'm like, okay, like I gotta do everything I want to do because I might be in bed with an ice pack on my head in a day or two. So that's where I'm coming from. This next session is kind of like future plans and acquisitions in one. And it's also things I talked about in my last video, so I won't spend too much time talking about them, but I did want to show in case anyone that didn't watch that video has that information, and we have it here for posterity's sake. So I actually thought I was going to knit this next project before I cast on the Ingrid sweater, but I needed some more materials, and I ended up being kind of distracted and trying to order things from Joanne, and then I never actually ended up ordering them. And then I was like, I'll just go to Michael's, I'll be in that neighborhood when I get my haircut this week, all while I start working on the Ingrid sweater. So the yarn that I have in my hand now is for the Whitmoor cardigan, and this is a pattern by Amy Lowden, and I believe it goes up to a 5XL 60-inch bust. And it is a lace yoke cardigan. So again, I talked about it in my last video, but as another rundown, it comes with a few modifications with the length and also the sleeves. So you can either do a tapered sleeve or a bishop sleeve, and then you can either knit it to your hip length or your waist length. And I feel like I have been actually working up to making this sweater. So I did like my Stockholm Slipover, which helped me do the short rows in the Ingrid sweater, and then in the Ingrid sweater I'm reading charts, and so now I feel like I'll be ready to like read a true lace chart for this sweater, and it'll be a little bit more challenging as well because it's a cardigan, and it won't be in the round. So I have all of that going for me. I did swatch up the yarn, and I talked about wanting a very specific type of pink, and I'm very happy with how this turned out. I just had this vision of like a pink romantic girly cardigan in my head, and this is what the swatch looks like, and the fabric is so soft. I'm sorry, I didn't mention the name of the yarn. This is the Mayflower Easy Care Merino and Super Kid Silk, both from Hobbi. And this is the swatch that it comes up with. So I definitely like this top color more than the bottom color, and I think the finished fabric reflects both nicely. And the like mohair has such a nice sheen to it in person. So I really just think this is going to be the perfect fabric for the sweater. Will I totally regret trying to make a lace sweater and using mohair the first time? Maybe. But I hit gauge, so this is all ready for when I want to cast on. And the last thing that I needed that I did not have was a set of DPNs for part of the sweater that I think it's for the button band. So I didn't have them. I wanted to buy wood ones, but my Michaels didn't have them. It's the one thing about living in a city is that like every regular like suburban store is half the size, and I think it has like half the things. Like a city Target, it sucks because it's like, this is like Target but not really, you know? I feel very limited here. I want the overwhelming choice of capitalism and consumerism, you know? Anyway, I kid, but I just needed some DPN, so I picked up the middle ones. I'll probably regret it, but that's a problem for future Amanda. The next yarn is something that I purchased actually when I purchased this pink yarn, and I just honestly wanted to make free shipping, but I figured I have travel coming up, so I'm going to this wedding this weekend, and then I'm going on another trip this next weekend, which I'll talk about in a bit, the next weekend. So I thought having a sock as a travel plan might be good. So I actually bought a pattern from the Crazy Sock Lady. Let me check my Ravelry. I went ahead and bought a sock pattern from the Crazy Sock Lady. Someone left a comment on my pattern video that doing a ribbed sock for the first time can be a little bit more forgiving in size, which of course makes sense. So I was like, great tip, I'm gonna do that. And it is, I think, just her take on the 3x1 ribbing pattern. So I got a pair of 9-inch circulars, and maybe I'll cast them on before Friday. And just like look at the pattern before then so I know what I'm doing. But I thought for the plain, perfect thing, because I don't want to bring my entire Ingrid sweater as much as I want to work on it. It just won't travel well. So I have this planned. All right. I think that has everything for like whips, acquisitions, things I purchased. As far as future planning goes, I do have one more note, and I messaged, I do have one more note, and I mentioned this in my last podcast episode, but I am going to Rhinebeck this year, which is completely unexpected, but I'm very excited. Although I'm not sure how much I'm actually planning to buy. And I know folks really go in with like a plan, I think, when they go to Rhinebeck. I honestly have no idea what to expect, other than I've read that there's really long lines and a lot of people, but that it is chiller on Sunday. So basically why it was unexpected is that my boyfriend's sister is getting married in the area in upstate New York that Saturday, and my boyfriend and I had already decided to make a little Catskills vacation out of it, and we'll actually need somewhere to go in between Saturday and Sunday, like that morning time before we can check into our Airbnb. So I realized, I was looking at a map actually, and I was like, oh, Rhinebeck, like, right, like that's in upstate New York. I was like, I wonder if we're gonna be there. I know Rhinebeck is this time of year. Looked it up, and I was like, hell yeah, we're gonna be there. So I texted my boyfriend, I'm like, I know what we're doing on Sunday. You're coming to the yarn festival with me. Don't know what to expect. So I feel like it's a little mistimed, because I had all this creative energy. I like bought all of this yarn, which I usually kind of don't buy, like probably 2 sweater quantities of yarn so close to each other, but I was like so pumped for these patterns. I knew I really wanted to make them, that I don't really like have a plan for Rhinebeck. I'm thinking I might just limit myself to like 1 or 2 sweater quantities of yarn, maybe 1 sock yarn. I don't have like huge plans now for like the rest of the year, so that's where I'm at. However, if you're going to be at Rhinebeck on Sunday, let me know. I would love to like meet people, and I'm very excited. So I will be talking about that in my next episode, I guess, or my next podcast episode. So that'll be part of it. I really don't know what to expect. Like I said, I've never been to like a sheep and wool festival. Yeah, pretty new, pretty exciting. And also I do, as much as like, I think, yeah, I'm very excited, in general for the opportunity. So I actually only have a few minutes left before I have to get back to some other things, but, the last section of the podcast is media that I've been consuming, and it does tell me, YouTube analytics do tell me that most people stop, there's a dip when I get to this point in my podcast, but I'll still use this part. Some people might like it. Media goes, which is usually I talk about either books, podcasts, or shows that I've been watching. I don't have a lot for this section, even though I've been making a lot. So for the most part, I have just delved back into Gilmore Girls, which I don't even feel like counts for a recommendation, because it's just like a very popular show, especially to watch this time of year. I will say in particular, my plan for Gilmore Girl purists is I'm not rewatching the whole series, but my comfort seasons are 3 and 4, but I'm challenging myself and I'm going into 5 and 6. I don't think I've rewatched season 7 since A Year in the Life came out, but I might push myself and be really brave and strong, watch season 7 and rewatch Year in a Life. I've been kind of wanting to rewatch it since it came out. Like I was in college when it came out, and I remember it was like Thanksgiving weekend and I was watching it with my mom. But I haven't watched it since then. So that is my media plan so far. Usually I find when like life gets a little hectic or stressful or crazy, I like going back to Gilmore Girls mostly. And I realize that like I get a lot of my sense of humor, I feel like, from that show. But okay, the one other thing that I just finished watching last night, I watched the new Hasan Minhaj comedy special on Netflix, and I think he's hilarious. But he also has that kind of style of comedy where he has moments of like sincerity, but it's also really funny. My boyfriend had never seen any of his specials, which I was like, what the fuck? So I was like, you need to go watch Patriot Act in his first special. But really, really good stuff, and I really enjoyed his special. So that's called, I think, The King's Jester. That's on Netflix. So I have not been reading a lot this month either. I have some therapy homework and some books to read from my therapist, but like I haven't really started it, so I'll let you know if I have any good finds from therapy. And then as far as podcasts, I haven't really branched out into anything super new to me. One podcast I'm not sure if I mentioned on this podcast before, if you like anything relating to like internet culture, like elder millennial content. I'm not an elder millennial, I'm kind of on the cusp there. Is Be There in 5 with Kate Kennedy. And this is a podcast I've kind of gone in and out of listening to for a long time. Some of her more popular episodes, she did like a deep dive on, I think I have talked about this, but I'll continue talking about it. Mormon mommy bloggers. She did a deep dive on Rachel Hollis. She's talked about episodes of like wedding culture and like sorority culture. And she gets like a lot of input from her viewers. And I really like her podcast. She's like a very calming voice. Disclaimer that it's extremely rambly if you don't like that. But you are watching like a 45-minute video about knitting, so you might like that. And she also does like a really touching and like vulnerable series about her journey with trying to conceive, which that's kind of like random and not really applicable to my life stage right now, but like I just kind of enjoy that perspective, and I enjoy someone who tries to be kind of like genuine and honest and open on whatever platform they have. So the podcast is called Be There in 5. It's by Kate Kennedy, and I really like it. So those are my recommendations. I was listening to it and my boyfriend was like, what is this? And I'm like, I just like having her on, and like she keeps me company sometimes. So I think if you're watching a knitting podcast, you can understand the feeling of like just wanting to have someone on in the background to listen to. And so if you don't want something visual, that's a good option. Whew, I always am like winded after these episodes. So that is it for this episode. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope to see y'all soon on my channel. And yeah, see y'all soon. Bye.